we're live. All right, I'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City Council for January 15th, 2024. First of all, Councilmember Gardner advised that he wouldn't be able to make it due to the date change. Thank you all for being flexible on canceling the meeting last week. We've had some inclement weather, as I'm sure everyone is aware at this point. And this month just so happened to be a good month to move it back a whole week instead of popping it back a day or two, simply because we have an extra Monday in the month. So it still works out to where we don't have to come back a week from now. We'll still have some time. So with that, I'll be leading invocation and pledge of allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to come together to do the people's business. Lord, we want to thank the first responders, police and fire, who have been out and about protecting us during this inclement weather and storm time. Lord, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to live in a city, in a community where we are blessed to have public servants that are out serving their community at times when we ourselves don't necessarily want to get out. Lord, thank you for the snow crew who was here tirelessly for days and days without going home to see their family so that they could try and keep the roads as passable as possible. Lord, please grant us wisdom today and guide us in your wisdom. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We will move on to approval of the minutes. You all received a copy of the minutes from January 2nd. I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. If there is none, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of January 2nd.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Under public comment, I have 3 public comment cards. Only, 2 of them are on an agenda item, so we will get to those on that agenda item. But Tricia Morin, come on down. State your name and address for the record, please.
Tricia Morin, 25 Sagamore Court. I'm presenting today on behalf of Maumelle Friends of the Animals, MFOA, which is a nonprofit based in Maumelle with the mission of helping animals in our community through a spay and neuter voucher program, community events, and pet owner education. We come to you today in regards to the hydrant painting fundraiser that MFOA has had for years. For a donation of $50, we custom paint hydrants around the city with a Dalmatian theme. We originally had an agreement with Maumelle Water Management to paint these hydrants. The inventory of available hydrants has decreased since Central Arkansas Water has taken over the Maumelle Water contract. So we are now trying to secure a written agreement with Central Arkansas Water so we can continue to beautify the community with the Dalmatian-themed hydrants. We come to the council asking for a show of support since there is strength in numbers. We'd like to send a letter of support from the council and the mayor's office, if possible, with our own letter. We hope Central Arkansas Water will be more inclined to continue this agreement by solidifying it in writing. We're trying to avoid disappointment in the case that Central Arkansas Water would paint over a donor's personalized Dalmatian hydrant before their term is up. We recently sent an email to all of you about this, and we would welcome your questions and support. So feel free to ask us questions tonight, or you can ask us later if you'd like. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, I was just going to ask you if you've already had some conversations with Central Arkansas Water. Yeah. What's their position at this point?
Yeah, they said they want to continue it, but we just want to put something in writing.
Okay.
But it hasn't been really, I guess the conversations with them have not been super definitive.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we will move on to financial statement review. Ms. Sousa is out of town today. She had come back from a vacation to be here for the meeting when it was supposed to be scheduled, but headed back out. So we have, excuse me, Senior Accountant Mary Nelson here to give the financial statement review. So go a little bit easier on her.
Good evening. My name is Mary Nelson. I'm the Senior Accountant for the City of Maumelle. Tonight I am presenting the preliminary and unaudited December of 2023 financial statements. So let's get started with the general fund. We are reporting $18.7 million in revenue, which exceeds budget by $1.8 million. This amount does include an entry of $1.1 million for the year-end estimated franchise and sales tax receivable. This is a 1-month estimation, and it will change when all these taxes are collected this month in January. The miscellaneous revenue, you'll notice a large variance between 2022 and 2023. This variance exists because of the 2022 one-time operating transfer in entry for the remaining balance of the Series 2015 principal and interest bond account. In the expenditure section of the general fund, we are under budget as a whole by $1.7 million. You may notice that the Public Works Department appears to be over budget by $74,000. This is a temporary overage, and I estimate it will be within $10,000 of budget once the November and December fuel allocations journal entries are entered. The Public Works Department initially pays for all fuel and oil purchases, and then they are allocated to the various departments based on their usage. Moving on to the capital expenditures for the general fund, we are under budget by $2.5 million. And of that amount, we have $1.2 million encumbered that will be carried forward to 2024. Now, if you turn the page to the balance sheet for the turn the page, you'll see the balance sheet for the general fund. You'll notice the liabilities are lower than 2022, and this will greatly change when the deferred revenue for the 2023 county millage that will be collected in 2024 is recorded. Last year's deferral amount was $2.29 million. This is an entry that will have zero net effect on the fund balance, as the taxes receivable asset account will also increase by this amount. Now on to the street fund. We are reporting $2.3 million in revenue, which is $243,000 greater than budgeted. This figure does include $149,000 in estimated sales tax receivable. This too will change as the actual amounts are collected in January. We are under budget in the operating and capital expenditure section for the street fund and have $500,000 encumbered for the capital expenditures, which are carried forward to 2024. Next, let's take a look at the street fund balance sheet. You'll notice the liabilities are lower in 2020 than 2022. This too again will change because of the deferred revenue for the 2023 county millage whenever it's recorded. Again, it will have a zero net effect on the fund balance because the taxes receivable asset account will also increase by this same amount. When you're looking at the sanitation fund, our revenue is close to projected. However, the expenses are down due to the staffing issues. And I have a lot of appreciation for the employees who have obviously worked hard to cover these staffing shortages. Concerning the capital expenditures, we have $21,000 encumbered out of the remaining budget. Lastly, in reviewing the police and fire fund, both the revenue and expenditures are greater than budgeted. These amounts should remain close, except at year-end when the estimated sales tax revenue entry is made. The estimated entry will be reversed in January as the actual taxes are collected. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Hang on a second. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, thank you very much for providing that tonight. Did a good job, thank you.
Thank you.
I just mainly just wanted to ask if you had any clue as to how the 2022 audit's going. Is the auditor's been in communication with you
Oh,
all?
yes, we've given them just about everything that they've required. They're coming out tomorrow. The one thing we're working on are the fixed assets and then some of the bond requests. Other than that, they have quite a bit that they're working on.
Okay.
You
All
should
right.
be pleased.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, sir. If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion to accept the financial statement. I've got a motion, second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. With that, we'll move on to a procedural motion. I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So moved.
I've got a motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll move on to unfinished business. The first item of unfinished business is the second reading of Ordinance 1103, amending the city code to provide a new land use category. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only. Pardon me.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1103, an ordinance to amend the Maumelle City Code to provide a new land use category of special use commercial and for other purposes.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Mazzoni.
Yeah, I was working with Mr. Grummer, and thanks for showing me a lot of patience and trying to educate me on the code. My concern, I'm not sure how it was worded. We came up with some notional wording, but we're still not convinced it meets the intent. My concern is this: is that there's a lot of unintended consequences. We write something, we need the Planning Commission to be able to have the ability to adapt at will, but also be able to tell a developer, no, that doesn't meet the intent. As written, without anything to quantify, I'm worried that a developer could come in with 3 or 4, commercial with a lot of residential and say, well, we are having the vast majority because we'll go by, taxes collected, and that revenue will be above and all out. And I don't think that will meet the intent. I don't know if I know we've worked with something good. I don't know if that's really worth inputting at this point. So I defer to you, Mr. Grummer.
Well, so the bulk of what you're talking about is regarding the Maumelle zoning code, right? Which
Correct.
is Ordinance 1105.
And the wrong one.
So it might be easier when we're talking about 1105 with the specific language regarding the zoning, unless what you're talking about is actually writing that into a land use category.
No, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, I have the same serious concerns as Mr. Mazzoni. Both the land use ordinance and the zoning ordinance would appear to make it easier to build apartments and other high-density housing here in Maumelle. And the language in order to do this is kind of confusing, and it leaves them open to interpretation. Mr. Grummer was nice enough to send me some language that he thought might be good to, I guess, make Mr. Mazzoni and myself feel better, but it didn't make me feel better. So anyway, I'm going to be opposed to those two ordinances. I really think, and in fact, I think Mr. Grummer, he and I were going back and forth. I think some of the things that are in the 1104, where they're wanting to change the land use, I think they can get there through C2. And so I really see no reason, I don't think, to go ahead and proceed with something that may open the door to a lot of high-density housing here in Maumelle. Do you have a comment on that? Am I right?
And so again, I guess you're talking about ordinance 1105, right?
1105, and it's hard to talk about that without also talking about 1101, 1103 and 1105, yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about the land use category of special use commercial at this time. Mr. Grummer?
So the land use category that we're proposing to add into the number of land uses that we have for the city can be used for C2, it can be used for PCD, special use commercial. And the category includes lands intended to accommodate a variety of commercial, light industrial, and residential mixed uses located around the village center and town center to include live-work units. That tells you within the land use of what the city can anticipate seeing within the zoning categories that come. But the specifics as to what type of density, what type of housing, how much housing is there, that's regulated by the zoning ordinance. It's not regulated by it's not specific to the land use.
Okay.
So what we're saying here is that we, as a city, based on what we've studied in the Maumelle Forward, what we've discussed in the past, what we're seeing in other cities like Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas, communities that are growing with downtown areas that have a mixture of commercial and residential, walkability, the things that you made the modification to the Club Manor corridor and approved that to make more walkability. So this type of land use is basically saying we're open to those type of developments. It doesn't say exactly how much of one. That's where the PCD Ordinance 1105 comes into play. So as far as the land use, that's not going to allow somebody to build just apartments or, something that you don't want. We need to get into the nuts and bolts in the zoning ordinance for that.
Okay. I do view these two together, and I think we ought to either vote them up or down together because one is there for the other one. So now I go back to the residents in this community don't want high-density housing. They prefer to keep this as single-family housing. I've walked door to door on campaigns. I'm in my third term. And that's one of the things they say is, don't you vote for any apartments or I'll vote you out of office. And it's primarily a traffic issue. I think everybody knows we live in the elbow of a river and we just don't have all the access to get in and out of town. And we had to build a third entrance just to alleviate total gridlock that we were experiencing with Maumelle Boulevard. And I don't know that there's any other way to get out of town other than what we've got now. So we haven't done a traffic study. We've never, in fact, I think that's a suggestion I'm going to make probably under Alderman comments is we ask the RDOT to come in and kind of talk about our situation out here and things we ought to be watching out for to make sure we don't get into a situation like that again. So, I'm going to go with the residents, and that's what I ran on. I said I won't vote for high-density housing or anything that'll encourage that to come in here. So I'm definitely a no vote on this. And I think this is really, this ordinance, it really comes down to, do you want apartments and high-density housing in Maumelle? Kind of like they've got in the downtown areas up there in Fayetteville and stuff like that, or down in the South Main area of Little Rock. Is that what we want, or do we want to keep our city the way it is and concentrate on single family? So when we get to vote, I mean, that's how I'm going to paint it. You're either voting for apartments or you're not. And so the residents, when they start seeing apartments go up, they'll know who brought them in. So Anyway, that's kind of my say. I'll yield to anybody else that's got a comment or a question.
All right, any other questions on the land use, which is ordinance 1103, Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Grummer, could you explain the difference between the land use map and the zoning map?
So the land use map is the regulatory item that we use to determine the development of the city, the uses of the actual land, what we want to see, whether it's residential use or commercial use. It's specific to the type of uses. The zoning map determines more specifically in that use what we want to see. So if it's a residential land use, then the zoning will say, well, we want an R1 single family low density, or we want an R2 medium density, or an R3 high density. So the difference between the two is one is telling us how we want our city to grow, and the other one is telling us specifically how to grow in that land use category.
Councilmember Holt?
I'll reserve most of what I want to talk about at the third reading, but read all four of these. Where did this originate? What was where did the concept come from, and is there someone out there waiting to apply based on what we approve here? Or is this just a creation of the planning commission for the city to plan a new concept for the city as a whole? Or how did this come about, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, initially this came about in the study that you did for the strategic plan for the city back in 2013. In that plan, there was discussions on what would be most economically feasible for the city to move forward in order to grow its revenue and increase the opportunities for growth for the city. In that, and there's specific sections that I refer to in our staff report, and I won't. It speaks directly towards the town center area, and some of the recommendations from that plan was to update our zoning code in order to allow for a mixed-use type development where you have commercial, residential opportunities in the town center area. So it initially started then. When I came in, it's one of the things that has been on our agenda to take care of and to move forward. There has been a development that has come to the Planning Commission that has been pulled for now, but there's somebody wanting to develop some land that may fit within this category, and but it's not predicated just on that. These are changes that we want, that we feel is in the betterment of the city, as well as meeting the plan that was set out originally in 2013.
So the element of having housing in each one of them, that's you can't have one or the other, or everything it's doing, it's what we got to have some residential or whatever with it. I make no pretense of having very much of a background, but I heard on television they gave a real estate nationwide comment this past week, and they said that the housing sales are the lowest that they've ever been in the last 30 years. And I just wondered, why do we have any interest in building more houses if people are not buying houses? And we have some remarkably good commercial areas, and that isn't developing either. So if we do this, is there going to be a new program to advertise it or push it? Or I hate to do things like that, and then it just sort of sits there until somebody comes along.
Well, again, there are developers out there that are interested in doing development similar to what's working in other communities, and this is kind of a step forward to help us get to that point. The housing market, that's due to high interest rates and other things going on. But one of the things that I think is important to think about as a community is, if all you focus in on is single-family housing development for the city of Maumelle, not that I'm for high-density apartments or anything like that, but you miss out on providing a diversity of housing opportunities for those that may not be able to buy a home or afford a single-family home. They may need something that is a little bit more affordable. So if you don't provide opportunities for that, then you're not creating diversity for your city, as well as opportunities for, I have a staff member that was looking for a home to move into Maumelle, and he couldn't do it because he couldn't afford to live here, and he finally has actually got a house outside the city, and that's the majority of our staff here at the city. So I think it's important to consider these things, and from a planning perspective, we look at how other cities are growing, and this is one of the things that'll help get us to that point.
I appreciate it. I'll reserve until next meeting. Appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Holt. I want to add a little bit to the question of where this came from. This, I ran on economic development several years back, twice. And it's easy to say economic development. That's an easy word. There's very few people who say, oh, I'm opposed to economic development. But what does that mean? And through the process of educating myself, both by taking basic economic developer courses, being a graduate and an advanced year graduate of the Community Development Institute, going on benchmarking trips to both big cities and small cities that are thriving economically. And the council, we went on that bike study tour, those who were able to go, and we got to go to Northwest Arkansas and see the areas that were thriving economically. When you look at those areas and you educate yourself on it, despite how someone wants to paint this issue as being about apartments or not, the reality is that economic development in 2024 is different than it used to be. Shopping is different than it used to be. You can think the old way and keep things the same, or you can find out how we can move forward, adapt and react to the market and what people are looking for. The day of big box stores popping up all over the place, I'm not saying it's gone, but it's not what it once was. Just like the malls went away, they still exist, but they're not what they once were. When you look at how people are shopping today and the trends in the way people are shopping, how they're shopping, what they're looking for, the types of shopping that you buy local versus the stuff you order online, whether you're going to make a trip to other areas, Little Rock or Conway. This started from the idea of, first of all, creating the sort of purchasing options that we were seeing in today's economy and that we're seeing here in Maumelle. What are people looking for when they go shopping? We still hold out hopes and continue to work on these great big outdoor commercial developments. But what we're really trying to focus on is local, small, organic businesses, the types of shopping that occurs through experience shopping. That is, I don't know how many of y'all have kids, but that are younger. It's nothing for me to go down and say, hey, do you guys want to go down to the river market? We can go walk, we can go play. While we're there, we might stop at the donut store, we might have lunch over here. It's about creating a destination that then also provides that shopping experience. What we're seeing in those areas that are really thriving is they've got those local small businesses, oftentimes, say, for example, on the first floor, and then we never really look up to the second floor or third floor to say, what are those? What are those items right there? What are those buildings? I don't know. I know it's on the bottom floor because that's where I go shopping. Well, what we're seeing is those areas that are really thriving are starting to incorporate mixed use. The idea of saying they want their customers upstairs. The people that are living upstairs aren't necessarily the types of, it might be a younger version of me who wants to live in an area where I can go downstairs and have coffee or, go down the street and, that sort of stuff. So the old way of looking at things, at the end of the day, we're government regulation, right? We can look, you mentioned the market, we can look at the market and see what people are doing, how they're shopping, those types of areas that create thriving communities, and then what do our government regulations allow? Right now, they don't allow the sort of things that the market is demanding. Our government regulations are prohibiting the sorts of development and the sorts of things that people want to say because they want things to stay the same. The reality is things aren't going to stay the same. They're going to keep moving forward. Maumelle is either going to continue to be a place that people desire to live at, that home values continue to be the type that people want to live there, or it's just gonna become a rusty, dusty old place that doesn't have the amenities that people are looking for in a community. Through that discussion, we then went into numerous different planning and studies, specifically looking at the Club Manor corridor. How can we create a place that capitalizes on people wanting to live, work, and play in the same area? It's the three rings, arguably: live, work, and play. We want a place where people can do all three together. We're seeing trends of people wanting to live, work, and play in smaller and smaller areas. They want to live upstairs, they want to work in the office, maybe on the second floor, and they want to go have their lunch at the unit on the first floor. And so we've been looking at these sorts of development ideas, but our code simply doesn't allow it currently. Our code doesn't allow for developers to develop the types of properties that we're seeing people want to be in. And so this is a kind of stopgap to be able to allow those sorts of developments to occur. I have additional comments when we get to the actual zoning ordinance and some of the things there, but just talking about the land use and this concept as a whole, it's been part of what we've been working toward for a while. Does that answer your questions?
It does. May I just make a very brief
Yes, sir.
statement? We saw several years ago at the Arkansas Municipal League, there was a speaker who came and gave a show on this very idea of restaurants, movie theaters, condos, etc., all in a very tight knit. And it does seem to be a viable plan. I think my point is that that's all well and good for so long as we're building in a balanced way. We have some of this and we have some of that. In the past, in my 30 years of residence in Maumelle, it is the housing people that is going to come first, and the contractors are going to get their money for so long as we build some restaurants or build these other things to go along with it and match it. It's all well and good. So I have no objection to that. Just make sure it's a balanced plan, and it's a great idea, but somebody's going to, in my job, we talk about cherry picking, and that's what would be happening there if they grab the houses. So end of comment. I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I want to follow up a little bit on what Mr. Holt was saying too, trying to identify who's pushing this. Is this something that you, the mayor, are wanting to push, or are the developers pushing for this? And as a courtesy, you put it on the agenda for them. Is Mr. Grummer pushing for this? Who's the push?
The timing of this is because, so there's often a lot of things we've been talking about. And in fact, I have been talking for 5 years about this idea of a comprehensive review of the planning code, right? So a more versatile, dynamic, and responsive code is something that we have talked about and wanted for a while. I was not involved with the specifics of the language that's in these ordinances at that sort of level. But what happens is we end up talking about these things. We've gone out and looked at creating an overlay district along Club Manor corridor. There's a cost associated with doing that and a lot of work that goes into that. And so these are things that we've been talking about. What happens oftentimes is there's all these things on your to-do list and we're listening to chatter out and about. And then all of a sudden when you hear somebody is interested in doing the types of development that the general type of development that you're looking for, then all of a sudden the urgency of this thing that's been on the back burner as we've been solving other problems pops forward. So I am absolutely pushing for a more versatile code that allows for mixed use, true mixed use. And I have seen samples of mixed use that have token commercial and mostly residential. That is not the sort of thing that I think we want in certain areas of town and not the sort of thing that I'm pushing. I'm absolutely pushing for a city code that allows in certain situations, the ability for the city to allow certain types of developments that do have non-traditional housing. The sort of housing that we don't have in Maumelle at all. So I am absolutely pushing for that.
Okay.
But I also think that has been spurred also, or pushed to the forefront by chatter and by people wanting to make those, that have those projects in mind.
Okay. I'd also like to comment, so you are pushing for this. The reference to Maumelle Ford, this is another good reason why I don't want to see the council adopt these plans and things like that and studies that we bring, because here, that was done back in 2011 years ago, and this is being presented as something that we committed that we were going to do. This was a guideline. It was heavily influenced by the developer community. I was at all the meetings, and that's what came out of it. They said we involved the residents. That's what they want. Well, they were there at the meetings and stuff, but the report, the steering committee and everything was heavily influenced by the developers. So, you know, I don't think we're obligated to build these nodes if we don't think it's in the best interest of the traffic, and the Maumelle residents don't want it. We're not obligated to do that. So I just wanted to address that. I think that's all I've got tonight.
Thank you, sir. And so I disagree with the characterization that this is something that is being promoted as that you have to do. This is a prime example of why planning and adopting plans is a good idea, because you still have the ability to say no. No one is up here, and we're certainly not implying in any way, shape, or form that the city council is obligated to do this. What it does is it provides direction, right? Planning is not a bad thing, especially to the planning department. The idea of saying this is where we want to go, generally speaking, but still giving the individual decision-making ability up to the council at moments like this is precisely why the plans work so wonderfully. So, Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I just, if you're still talking on that subject, go right ahead, because I had kind
No,
of...
sir, I was done and about
Okay.
to hit the next council member, but I'm assuming you wanted to respond to what I said, so I bumped you in line.
Thank you. And my biggest concern is that you got, what is it, Track D that's between Kroger and the car wash? Is that what that is? Track D, is that what we call that? I'm aware that land was sold to a entity that likes to develop apartments. And so I'm concerned that if we pass this, there'll be a way for them to build a lot of apartments, maybe high-rise, maybe 4 stories, stuff like that. And then the area that's across the boulevard from where we are right now has kind of stalled out. And at one time, it was proposed to build some apartments in there quite a bit. And so I'm worried that if we put this in effect, they'll switch their plan and go with apartments over there. So I don't know. You got to alleviate my concerns on all this kind of stuff.
Mr. Mayor.
So if I could address that also. So I have, you are correct, and Track D is a big concern because that is not an area that I'll speak for Scott here, think that is a prime location for apartments. It is, however, a prime location for a mixed-use development where you can get commercial as the primary, as required, but when we get to 105, we can talk about that, is the primary purpose of the development being commercial. The idea that then it also has residential incorporated with it as a secondary use, a secondary use as determined by staff, the Planning Commission, and the City Council is, I don't think, necessarily a bad thing. I think it meets what I was talking about earlier with the market issues. Now, that is not an endorsement for any particular development, because I have seen, ideas of what could go on track D that I think represents a token commercial element that is heavy in apartments. And we haven't seen those plans even submitted because we killed them before they got far at all, because we were like, no, this is not even primarily commercial. This is some token commercial. So it was just a sketch, and like, no, this doesn't meet mixed use. This is not mixed use, this is apartments. And we haven't seen anything from them, and well, I won't get too much into 105, because, and the reason I'm trying to separate these a little bit more than normal is if we get into a large discussion on the language in the zoning ordinance 105 while we're talking about 1103, then we'll have to have that discussion again to make motions to amend it in a little bit. So, I just wanted to clarify two things. One, our concerns are similar, and it's the concerns of everyone here, in terms of not thinking Track D is a good location for a pool of apartments. Now, the businesses around might disagree, but we don't think it fits the area as just a bunch of apartments in that area. Scott, you were gonna add something.
Just real quick, and I'll say that, I believe that we've made actions that are actually moving in the direction of what you're talking about. The C2, before we amended that ordinance, R3 multifamily housing was allowed by right in a C2, which means that they didn't even have to come to city council. They could have gone into C2 and done apartments by right. And we came in and we changed that to a conditional use, so it has to come to city council, and you determine whether or not if that R3 is gonna come in. So, think about that C2 versus PCD. A PCD or a PUD, a planned unit development, provides more generalized language to allow you the decision-making on what you want to see versus a C2. And keeping Track D as a PCD gives greater authority to the Planning Commission and the City Council to make decisions on what you feel is appropriate for the surrounding area, the impacts, and that's where you get into the zoning.
I want to speak to this. I was talking to the city attorney earlier today. In the past, an applicant that submitted something to, for PRD or PCD was largely approved, provided that it just met the minimums of that section of code. We have revamped that a whole lot. What a PUD, a planned use development, planned use commercial, or planned use residential, does is give the city more ability to sort of give and take, and to require certain things, and the ability to assess whether a particular development as submitted meets it fits with the surrounding, and it has all those categories of considerations that we can look at that gives us more authority and more leeway with regards to those developments than, say, if it comes in, hypothetically, if something came in under C2 and then had R3 as a conditional use, the restrictions that we could put on those R3 housing types are actually oftentimes less than we have if it's a PUD. If it does that, we can negotiate and write those things in and say we're going to accept it if it's this but not this, and we have more ability to shape what those developments look like. And that's kind of in response to the one, I don't remember who asked it. I was watching the council meeting live last time because I was COVID positive, but and I wanted to shout, so if the C2 already does it, well, the PCD, I think, gives us more ability to get not just the boxes checked, but more ability to shape that particular development. And so we've been doing that for a little while. I think that work and that shaping occurs primarily at the staff level. That is before things are being submitted, and that those pre-submittal meetings where the city is able to kind of shape what that development looks like. So we don't see that here at the council level. Then that also occurs at the planning commission, where they can shape that. And so by the time it comes here, it's pretty much more or less in line, or has been since we've kind of instituted the change and started treating PUDs like they were supposed, like PUDs are supposed to be treated. So I was telling the city attorney, it doesn't so I understand why there was requests to write some of that stuff into the actual ordinance, is because it doesn't feel, I'm sure, to the council that there has been a shift in that regard. But with that, Councilmember Shin has had his button checked for a while. Hopefully you remember what you were gonna talk about. Mostly.
I wanted to clarify a little bit about the change in the real estate market, because Maumelle is not typical of what you read about. Saw a big headline during the snow this last week about the real estate crash that's coming. When I actually read the article, it was all on commercial, mostly office space. Did not address real estate at all. Been actively involved in the Maumelle real estate market now for a year and a half. The difference now in 18 months ago is 18 months ago you set your price high, you put it on the market and took bids. It was like an auction. In 48 hours you had 12 people look at it, you got 6 offers, and you got to choose. The difference now, instead of selling in 4 days average time in Maumelle, it's 40, but they're still selling. They're not getting 10 over asking, they're getting asking or right around it. Maumelle is not your typical real estate market, so don't panic. We may not see a lot of new development because of interest rates at the moment. Our big problem in commercial is our commercial land is overpriced. If you can go over here and pick out a piece of land and it's $300,000 as an example, and the same one in North Little Rock is $175,000, you're probably going to spend $175,000 if you're still going to be on the boulevard. And I have speculations as to why it's that way. I can't prove it, but I don't think we have enough diversity in our land ownership. The same few people own the land on the boulevard, and they set the price. I've watched businesses locate in North Little Rock right across the line because it was so much cheaper to develop. So, oh, and one more thing.
Yes,
This is
sir.
what I nearly forgot. I think it's interesting how we want to compare ourselves to Conway and Bryant and other places on certain issues, and when we look at an issue like this that is comparable or comparable, oh no, we don't want that. Well, how can we be comparable if we don't offer the same things that they offer?
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, you were talking about how PCD and PRD, it's easier for the staff to maybe mold these things to the right way or whatever. The problem is, I mean, maybe the mayor has told these department folks that, no, you're not going to get this because we're going to mold it. We're not going to let you do that. Well, what happens if we approve this and it's on the books and the mayor moves on to something else after the end of his term, and you go somewhere else, and we have a administration that is more inclined to give the developers what they want. So at that point, we're exposed. We don't have somebody that's sworn to do things right running the place. So I just, I hate to put something out there that can be done that we may not be able to control down the road. So.
Thank you, sir. And just it is not me who approves the PUDs, it's the city council. So regardless of who the mayor is or what I say versus, it's ultimately approved at the end of the day by the city council, not by the mayor or staff.
Well, you mentioned staff can have a lot to do with molding these things. That's what I was keying on.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry,
Yes, sir.
I don't want to lose this. So, and it's more to mold towards how we feel City Council and Planning Commission see things and what we hear that the community wants. But one of the reasons why I don't want to use C2, and the reason why I don't want Track D to be rezoned from PCD to C2 is that from the majority of the residents that I've heard from, they want to have a place like a town center, a downtown that they can go and enjoy. If you rezone that to C2 in an ability to try to do mixed use, somebody, if you like fast food restaurants, then by right, you can have a Track D full of nothing but fast food restaurants by right, and they can come in and do that. So by leaving it PCD and providing some language that gives us flexibility in there, it allows us the ability to create a town center that actually meets the needs of the community and not just a car-centric place where people want to go and grab a quick bite and go back to the house real quick.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there any other discussion on ordinance 1103? If not, this will be on third reading at the next city council. Madam City Clerk, if you could please give the second reading of ordinance 1104, amending the Maumelle Land Use Plan and Map.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1104, an ordinance amending the city's land use plan map for the property commonly known as 1605 Club Manor Drive and for other purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. This one's a little bit different than the general discussion on that category specifically. It is talking about a particular property at the 1605. Yes, sir. Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Grummer, I don't think this came up during discussion of the first reading, but could you talk about, so the code, as the council members are aware, gives several factors for considering when deciding whether to amend the land use plan map. Mr. Grummer, could you talk about some of the changes that have happened that merit changes in the area, to the parcel itself, to the neighboring parcels, that would merit changing this from institutional to special use commercial?
Yes, sir. So there are 4 considerations or guidelines that you use. Other changes that have occurred in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted. Well, one of the changes is the fact that there's a single-family residential development that was originally zoned for PCD commercial, and it was rezoned to PRD. So it's effectively, since this land is land use is institutional, we found that it's not an appropriate use for C2, as well as trying to accommodate what's in the surrounding area. The SUC, as we see it with the land use, proposed land use in the PCD would work better for us to have a development that's going to complement and be sensitive to the surrounding area. The other one, whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character sufficiently to justify the proposed land use. Again, the housing that's been developed right there on the cusp of that. Issues and concerns raised by the neighborhood when submitted with sufficient specificity to enable the commission or city council to respond to the issues. Well, that one's not really as far as any concerns there. And then other substantial or technical evidence that any proponent or opponent of the proposed change submits. Of course, we haven't seen or heard of any opposition to this change or modification. It actually did come in whenever the proposed, when the community meeting happened with the developer that has a proposed development on this site. The community came together. I think there were some members here that attended that. And there wasn't any general opposition. There was concerns by some residents that lived over there and had some questions about that, but that's specific to the development. There was concerns about housing, high-density housing and things of that nature that I recall.
All right, Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, this is a parcel of land where a developer wanted to put in townhomes only, and it was turned down by the council, I think by a 5-3 vote. And so obviously this developer thinks that perhaps he can go ahead and get some of that high density in there by going to this new land use that would be allowed under 1103.
Well, it's not actually high density. It's actually considered a low density based on the percentage that they have in there.
But it's not single family though, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be single family. I mean, it can be a duplex is not considered high density. A triplex is not considered a high density unit.
Well, I consider,
from a definition standpoint.
well, whatever, it's housing, and obviously they think they can, you're more apt to get it through, and then they're welcome to try to put it through again. I mean, anybody's welcome to do that. But, anyway, it's just an example of, I think, what we'll be seeing if we adopt those other two ordinances.
So, and I will mention, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification to the council, that if the proposed land use SUC fails, which is prior to this one, this ordinance fails as well.
Thank you, sir. If there's nothing further, this will be on third reading at the next city council meeting. Madam City Clerk, if you could please give the second reading of Ordinance 1105.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1105, an ordinance to amend certain Maumelle City Code provisions concerning the planned commercial district, zoning district, and for other purposes.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Mazzoni, this is the ordinance I think that you were speaking to, and really where I believe there was discussion at the last, I know there was discussion about creating some sort of way to ensure that we don't end up with heavy residential and token or light or secondary or tertiary commercial just to say they did that. I think that a couple things on that. First of all, I think that the current language is sufficient in terms of it requires there to be that commercial has to be the primary use for that property. I am not opposed to additional language, though, that more specifically spells out how that's going to look. One of the difficulties, and I sympathize with anyone watching online right now who's jumping up and down saying, oh no, we need to make it, you guys need to do this, that, and the other. While I was at home with COVID watching the last council meeting, I wanted to say, no, if you set a percentage limit at anything, say less than 50%, then if you had a two-story building, the first floor being 100% commercial and the second floor being residential, then that percentage of a third, or there was different numbers thrown out, would not allow that to occur. And so it's trying to come up with a way to specifically state the regulations, if that's what the council's wanting to do, in a way that still allows the sort of mixed use that we're trying to get here. Or get this idea of how do we, well, I won't get back on everything I talked about before. How do we get the right sort of commercial while still doing exactly what Councilmember Mosley wants, which is, and I think most people here, which is to not throw a bunch of apartments in places that we don't think apartments are good at. Scott, y'all asked Scott to come up with some language of some changes that could be made. We did that, and as I was talking with the city attorney earlier today, there was actually questions about the process for and procedure for amending a planning ordinance, amending Chapter 94, because 94 spells out the procedure for amending. And so we had some questions. Mr. Thornton, maybe you could talk on that for a moment.
Yes, sir. Just bring it up on my, one second. So I'm looking at in code section 9410, which is the procedure for amendments both to the zoning map and to any other amendment in chapter 94, which is the zoning regulations. And in particular, of course, this went through Planning Commission first, and it was discussed, and Planning Commission released it with a due pass recommendation, and that's how it came before you today. And the code says, City council may return the proposed amendment to the planning commission for further study, or by majority vote, adopt by ordinance the proposal as submitted by the planning commission. It does not provide a procedure to allow the city council to amend a proposal from the planning commission and then adopt it as amended. You can send it back to the planning commission for further study, it says, with suggested changes or what you would like to see. But it would, as I read the code, the procedure doesn't allow the city council to just amend a proposal that came out of the planning commission. It would have to be sent back. I think, as I read it with Mr. Mayor this afternoon, I think that procedure, binds the city council a little too much. So probably in a February or March meeting, I'll have a proposal in front of you to amend that procedure to give you more options when you get a recommendation for an amendment from the planning commission. But as it stands now, the codes only allows you to either adopt it by majority vote or send it back to the planning commission. And again, that's section 9410, subsection 5.
And I guess hypothetically, or to just deny it.
Yeah, or just deny, yeah, that's fine.
Accept as submitted, deny, or send it back, and which I don't think we've done that in the past. We were going back and forth on that, and definitely we want to change the procedure in the ordinances to allow for that to occur. With the city attorney's opinion, then we didn't come with specific language that could be used to add to the ordinance to provide additional safeguards. But as I understand it, it can go back to them. We can give them that. But Scott did come up with some additional language attempting to reach to, and I'm not sure if you guys have seen it or not, attempting to speak to that point. Scott?
Yeah, so I did email Councilmember Mazzoni and Mosley some suggestions based on the comments that you provided the last time. We can certainly do that. I guess after thinking through it, and the reason why it was hard for me to get that language to you fairly quickly is because by doing that, you're placing more of a restriction similar to what you would have in Euclidean zoning, which is R2, C2 specifics. And again, with the PCD and the PRD, those are meant to be more generalized because you want to give flexibility in order for developers to be able to come to the Planning Commission and City Council with unique ideas. If you put restrictions in there, then you can limit them you could potentially be limiting them. I'm not saying that it would, but the language that you have in the ordinance provides the generalized, I believe, the generalized language for the PCD to be restrictive. And there's a section that was not included in the ordinance because nothing changed in it, but it was referred to under item C. I said the Planning Commission, it says item C, residential uses suggested in the R2 and R3 districts. It is in the intent of the section to be highly restrictive in determining the appropriateness of residential uses in the PCD zone. Residential uses shall refer to section 94449B1. Now that was not in the ordinance. I don't know if any of y'all went to go read that, but when you read that section, it states that the planned unit development residential densities shall be determined on the basis of the following considerations: the densities designated by the land use plan, the densities of surrounding development, the densities allowed under the various zoning districts, the urban development goals and other policies of the city, the topography and character of the natural environment, and the impact of a given density on the specific site and adjacent properties. And to me, that's one of the key is the ability of the Planning Commission and City Council to come back and say, now we believe that what you are proposing has a negative impact on the surroundings. So those are the generalized flexibilities that you have with that. If we put in specific building coverage ratios and overall lot ratios, then you're starting to put restrictions that you could end up losing some opportunities. But that's my opinion. So.
Mr. City Attorney?
I just wanted to follow up on that, Mr. Grimmer. If I understand you correctly, and this is how I read it, so 1105, I'm looking at page 2. It would add as a conditional use to PCD, it would add residential mixed use as a conditional use. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that would require city council approval because it's conditional, right?
Correct.
And because this is a planned unit development, it would also require city council approval of the preliminary development plan.
That's correct.
And planning commission approval.
Correct.
Okay. And then, so these factors that you list and which subsection C refers to, these factors in 94-449B1, the densities of the land use plan, the densities of the surrounding developments, urban development goals and policies of the city, are these the factors that then the planning commission and the city council would use in deciding whether to approve the conditional use, whether to approve that residential development, mixed-use development?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. So then I agree with Mr. Grummer then that this would give the city council flexibility to consider these factors, the densities, the urban development goals of the city, and so on and so forth, when you're deciding whether to then approve a plan or not. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, I wanted to ask Mr. Mazzoni, are you comfortable with any of that language that Mr. Grummer sent you, or, how comfortable are you with that?
Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yes, thanks. I like the intent of this. I do. I'm not comfortable that it prevents, you've said exactly what my worry is, a token mixed use to come in without anything. Could I argue come in and go, hey, I got 2 small areas of commercial and some residential, but the commercial is gonna bring in 51% of the revenue. That's a majority. That seems to me, not being a code guy, that would match the written word, but not what the intent is. And it's a lot harder for a planning commission if something meets the written word to go, well, it's not what we wanted. Yeah, but it matches. That's my concern, that if it's not worded well, I don't want to be restrictive, but on the same side, we also need to be able to prevent the token ones to get here, because yes, we are the final approval, but there's a lot of steps up to where it finally gets to us, from the initial proposal, not even before the initial proposals, people wanting to do something all the way up to here. So that's my concern. Now, will it be worth going back to look at some of the verbiage or not? I don't know. I'm just, personally, I'm not convinced 100% that this gives us protection against, just a token. That's honestly where I'm at.
So I think one of my concerns would be that you could add language to try to prevent that token, but then if you add language that becomes more specific, it could be more restrictive, but more specific. Does it mean that if they come in with this specific use, that it limits that generalized area of making a decision of saying, well, we meet your specific guidelines that you've set in here, so you should be able to approve it, versus if we don't have those specific guidelines that I shared with you and Councilmember Mosley, then, the city attorney saw the wording in that as well. I'm just wondering, you could end up I don't know if that's the right term. You could end up just having a negative effect by putting more in there. But, I'll be more than happy to, if the city council votes to bring it back, then by golly, we'll work with it. But I'm just under the impression to keep it more generalized, to give it more strength for the council.
I think, if I may, and I understand where you're coming from, because this needs to be done right. Doing it wrong ends up in a place of trouble. And so we were, Scott, me, and the city attorney were today talking about just that. And I mean, you heard the city attorney say that he thinks this gives the council the tools to take into consideration the factors that we're concerned about and make that decision. Now, what that doesn't do is, it doesn't matter who the mayor is. What it matters is who the council members are on the council, right? And so if you end up with a bunch of council members who say, oh, this seems to be a great fit, then then those percentages are not that big of a deal because the council's just approving it. And I've kind of juggled with that, to which my thought is, well, that's the elected body of the people, for one. And so they should be able to have the determination. Then even if you write it into the code and the city council can change the code in the future. So we think that we have the tools in this right now to prevent the sorts of concerned token commercial developments. Those tools are there. It's just up to the council as to how to use that, right? Or how to interpret different elements and what is a primary versus secondary use on that property. But ultimately, we're talking about that we think the council has the control with this. I'm not opposed to going back in and trying to find or add more language to do whatever, but one of the problems that we have with our code in general is it's just outdated, a lot of Euclidean zoning versus form-based zoning that makes it hard for a municipality and a government to adapt to the market as it's constantly evolving. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, Mr. Mazzoni, I'm with you. It sounds like our best option is to perhaps send this back to planning and ask them to look at it and see if they can't make it to where everybody's more comfortable with it. I have a feeling nobody's totally comfortable with this. So I guess I'll make a motion that we send this ordinance number 1105 back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration and just for reconsideration.
And so with the, I don't want to amend your motion, I just want to make sure we can send it back for further study. Is the idea that further study will include additional safeguards to prevent residential focused developments from occurring in PCD?
Actually, you said that very well.
Okay, did you write every word of that down? Okay. So it was if you're amending your motion, Councilmember Mosley, the motion is to send it back to the Planning Commission to consider this with additional safeguards to prevent token commercial developments from occurring.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Mazzoni?
Actually, one question, so if it comes back with, they feel that there's all safeguards in there and any substantive changes would actually hurt us more than help, would these now, since no changes, would we be on third reading next time? Or because it goes back, would it automatically revert to first reading?
Mr. City Attorney?
Makes sense.
So since if the council sends it back to the planning commission, Scott, when's the next planning commission meeting?
The public hearing would be February 22nd, is that correct?
Okay, so I don't think we'd have a decision back from planning commission until March. I don't know if it would be on third reading for the first reading, for the first meeting in March. I don't know. From now until then, if that comes to be, I'll research the point. Part of the reason for having three readings before you can actually take action on an ordinance is so that you give enough notice to the population, because you're changing the code, which is the law. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, I don't know. But I'll find out.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion to send this back to the Planning Commission for additional safeguards? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the second reading of Ordinance 1106, amending the city code to include cash bottoms. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1106, an ordinance to amend the Maumelle City Code to add a new section concerning cash bonds posted and cash deposited with the city.
All right, I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, this will be on third reading at the next city council meeting. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the second reading of Ordinance 1107, amending amending home business and occupation definition. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1107, an ordinance to amend the definition of home-based occupation in the Maumelle City Code and for other purposes.
All right, I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, this will be on third reading at the next city council meeting. We'll move on to the next agenda item, the second reading of Ordinance 1108, amending the annual business registration fees. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1108, an ordinance to amend the Maumelle City Code to increase annual business registration fees and solicitor permit fees and for other purposes.
I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, this will be on third reading at the next meeting. At this time, I'll go ahead and convene the Board of Sign Appeals. The council set a meeting requesting a sign variance. You received a letter from the applicant. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here at this time? Mr. Andrews, come on in if you're out there. Scott,
He may have forgotten that it was on the agenda.
okay, so y'all received a letter. This is a request for a variance. Scott, do you want to tell us about that?
So the sign ordinance restricts the size of a residential subdivision sign to a certain size. And I'm sorry, I didn't review it before I came up here, but the subdivision at the end of Country Club Parkway, which is called the Reserve, is being developed. The streets have been finished out, and it's been sold to D.R. Horton, who's going to be building houses in there. And they're wanting, it has a roundabout in the very entry part of it. It's a very large roundabout. And they're wanting the subdivision sign to be a little bit larger in order to better, it's appropriate for the size of the roundabout and shouldn't be restricting, but it also provides a nice entryway into the subdivision. So because it exceeded the size that we have in our ordinance, they're asking for a variance and I believe that is stated in the letter.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Thornton?
So I just want to give the council members the standard to apply in deciding this appeal. So the council, which is the Board of Sign Appeals, has the duty to hear and decide appeals. And here they are appealing the Mr. Grummer's denial because according to the literal provisions of the code, and their request for a variance from the literal provisions of the code for the erection of a sign in instances where strict enforcement of the chapter would cause practical difficulties due to circumstances unique to the individual sign under consideration, and the council can grant such variance only when it is demonstrated that such action will be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the chapter.
Councilmember Williams?
I just have a question. So I know we have, before, I think we were talking about a sign going up at the charter school that was going to be super lit. It was going to be super bright. The only thing in this letter says it is our hope that a well-lit, large sign will prevent people from jumping the curbs and driving through the roundabout. I'd like to know how big this sign's going to be and how well-lit it's going to be.
There were plans that were submitted. Well, were those plans not part of the packet, I guess?
No.
Okay.
No, there's nothing in the packet that says anything about it.
The city attorney suggested possibly tabling this
We have plans.
until the next council meeting, and we can get you that application, and then have an applicant here. Was that all, Councilmember Williams?
Yes, sir, I believe so. I just know that, they've built that, it's right there where the Memory Care Center is, right? That particular roundabout.
It's at the end of, yes, it's past.
No, it is not, that roundabout is not the one we're talking about. If you continue past that roundabout and on down to where it used to dead end, there's a residential subdivision that has been developed. They've built in, almost right in the beginning, a big roundabout there. That's where they're wanting.
But it would be shining right into houses, I would think.
I don't think this is a backlit light. It's not one that's like an LED light outwards. Think more of the one on Country Club Parkway.
Lights focusing on.
Lights onto the side, not like an LED light with your gas prices and the scrolling messages.
Okay, that was my
But we don't
concern.
have the
Yeah, there's
that
nothing to show us that.
information or anyone to explain what those considerations are.
Well, can I make a motion, sir, to table this until we do have that information?
You may. I'll entertain that as the motion. Second. I've got a motion and a second. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I was just going to verify that was down there at the very end of Country Club Parkway where it's been all cleared. I was out there yesterday looking it over. And, yeah, we need to see, tell them to bring some pictures. We want to see what it's going to look like and all that stuff. So, yeah, I favor tabling this till next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, as a matter of procedure, I know that the setting of the Board of Side Appeals is a significant thing that the council has to set the meeting. By tabling it, does that also serve to set the meeting at that?
Usually we consider that if it's discussed at the notice to date and then tabled, we consider that the notice continues.
Thank you, sir.
But I would like to put a specific date into the motion. So whether it's February 5th or the next one, whatever you prefer. But just so people who might be here or who watch.
Well, we will meet in a week, right?
2 weeks, actually. We've got 5 Mondays this month. So if you're, if you want to amend your motion to table this to the February 5th City Council meeting?
Yes, let's do that.
We're not moving that one to a Tuesday, are we? Unless it's raining? Okay. So we've got a motion and a second to table this until the February 5th meeting. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes. Yes. All opposed, no. This is tabled. I will go ahead and adjourn the Board of Sign Appeals at this time. And that brings us to new business. The first item of new business is the Planning Commission appointments. We have 2 applicants, John Jones and Alice Falk. They have received copies of your resume and letters that you submitted to the City Council. At this time, we'll each come up one at a time in the order on the agenda to introduce yourself to the City Council. Because this is an open public meeting, we can't require that the applicant not being questioned leave, but we would invite Ms. Falk to step out of the room so she doesn't get an advantage to all the questions. Thank you. I don't know that I've ever seen you before. Could you introduce yourself to me, please?
No problem. John Jones, 4 Hogan Drive, Maumelle, Arkansas. Been a resident a long time. I saw the 80-page packet, so I know you guys are busy. I could tell you more about myself, but you probably remember from last time. So I look forward to any questions. Actually, I'm really excited. The discussion earlier today was really nice because in Maumelle, we definitely have some cool stuff. That Track D, also with the food court and the corridor going in, there's a lot of opportunities to really, I don't want to say upgrade the city. I mean, we're always going to be a nice city just because of the location and what we've done so far. But I look forward to being able to modify that some because there's some really good things. And part of my career, I've gotten to go through with IT and got to live in some other cities like Los Gatos and things like that in California. There's lots of value add to be able to I mean, I just came from Irving, Texas. They have a lot of AT&T, Verizon right beside each other, especially with their living too right there, and a lot of businesses. I almost call it Little India, but it is absolutely a nice place. So any questions from you guys?
Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank you for your persistence in trying to get onto this. I think you're qualified, and I am looking forward to you being on there. You've got a couple of pairs of big shoes that you all will be filling. Mr. Fisher's out in the audience. He's been on the Planning Commission for almost as long as there's been dirt in Maumelle. So anyway, thank you so much for your service, Mr. Fisher, and for, I think it was Mr. Smith is the other one. Would that be correct? I think so. But anyway, so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you on here, and thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Any additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
We'll go ahead and invite Ms. Folk back in. Yes, ma'am?
There are 2 positions we are filling tonight, right?
Are there 2 positions we are filling tonight?
Yes.
That seems to be the case.
Position 6 and 7, okay, gotcha.
Come on down. If you could please introduce yourself to the council.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Alice Folk, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all tonight, and since y'all have now released me from my quarantine across the hall. I've lived in Maumelle for about 11 years now. My background is probably not the most traditional background. I retired from Little Rock Police Department as an assistant chief, worked there for 28 and a half years, and then went to be the chief at the State Capitol Police Department for 2.5 years. And currently, I'm working as the HR director for North Little Rock Wastewater Utility. And I say all that to say I've just been looking to find ways to get more involved in my community. I really enjoyed it when I was at Little Rock Police Department. It was a city I got to give back to, but I'd like to finally give back to a place where I call home, you know, and try to help this place continue to grow and be a better Maumelle.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, you've done a lot of things. And that's very impressive. I remember you when you were there, I think the Little Rock Police Department just
Yes,
like
sir.
a couple of years ago, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I retired in October of 2020, and then I left to go to the State Capitol Police as soon as I retired there. And I was there until April of this year. And my mom had some health issues, and I took off to help be with her. And I started back working in August of this year.
All right. I like to follow wastewater and water departments and things, and are you currently with you're not currently with North Little Rock Wastewater?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh, you are?
Mhm.
Okay. What do you do for them?
I'm the Human Resource
Human
Director.
Resources, okay.
I've learned more about collection systems than I ever thought I would in my life.
With the turnover going from MWM to CAW, I learned some about the North Little Rock wastewater and was very impressed. So thank you for applying. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on the Planning Commission.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right, thank you. At this time, y'all should have a ballot at your desk. If you could please indicate the top two folks. So you get, are you doing two ballots?
No.
Or just one ballot? One ballot, okay.
And we are filling two positions, correct?
That is correct. We're filling two positions with two applicants. Mr. Jones, do you have any children? Yes. Okay, then this is like the prime example of persistence paying off. I mean, I don't know how the votes are going to turn out, but so or sort of stranger things have happened. We don't have any Chads that can be hanging off or in their council member seat, but please send those down. The problem with two ballots is we might have gotten to a sticky situation where half of the people appointed one to, anyway. Yeah.
Okay, well, one of them says position 6 and the other says position 7.
Yeah, it's position 7 on one ballot. Yeah, it should be 6. That way they don't have to.
All right, after tallying the votes, both of y'all have been appointed to the Planning Commission. It was close, but it occurred. Thank you all for your service and willingness to volunteer. For those of you who didn't get the position, try again. We now have proof that, yes, Mr. City Attorney?
I know that Mr. Fisher is in the audience, and I just wanted to recognize his, as Mr. Mosley said, his many, many years of service to the city of Maumelle by the Planning Commission. And we certainly appreciate all the experience and time that he's given to the city. I just wanted to make that known.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fisher. How long have you been on the Planning Commission? Approximately 21 years. Maumelle hasn't changed much in that time, but that means you've been involved in one form or the other with the shape that Maumelle has taken over the last 21 years. Thank you very much for that. With that concluded, the next item, this also means this is your last time attending the City Council meeting as a liaison, but you'll be here every meeting? That is not correct, okay. We will move on to the next item of business, which is the reading of Resolution 2024-01, authorizing the mayor to execute a settlement. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas. A resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2024-01. A resolution to authorize the mayor to execute a settlement agreement with Team Summit for failure to pay rent for use of the Park on the River from May 2019 through March 2023, and for other purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so I have a couple public comment cards on this, but what I will do is have the city attorney explain the resolution. But before council member comments or discussion, we'll then invite the public up once you've been introduced to the resolution. So with that, Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, sir.
Hang on just a second. My camera just went off, and I want to make sure we're getting the stream didn't end. Ended right when we started discussing the mayor's salary. And so I stopped that and said, no one say anything. Let's get this live. Okay, it looks like we're still live. Mr. City Attorney?
Okay, thank you, sir. We last spoke about this at length on November the 20th. We spoke about it several times last year. On November the 20th, you all asked me to obtain revenue figures from Team Summit. And I did because that was necessary to calculate how much rent they would owe us. You all will recall that under the 2015 lease agreement, a portion of the rent that Team Summit owed the city each month, depending on their net revenue. And then we also, on January the 2nd, I reported to you that I had just received the revenue figures and that I would be plugging them into the spreadsheet. And it's also included in the packet today. And I emailed to you all previously an updated spreadsheet that I had prepared. I just want to briefly explain the figures. I separated the period of time into the time that was under contract, which the city has not billed Team Summit for. I obtained the revenue figures from Team Summit, plugged those in. The total I got for that figure is, for that period of time, is $30,000 and change. And the exact figure is there, $30,289.81. The second period of time is more difficult. That runs from December of 2020 through March of 2023. It's more difficult because it's a period that's not under contract. In the contract, we had a specific formula to calculate how much Team Summit owes the city. And in my memo to Mayor Norris that we discussed last year, I explained that, well, if Team Summit didn't pay for the time that was under contract, we just have a simple breach of contract claim. And I can easily calculate how much the city is owed because I can easily calculate what we're owed under the contract. Second period of time, from December 2020 through March of 2023, more difficult because it's not a breach of contract claim. I've been asked several times, and I think it was discussed, I think Mr. Mosley and I discussed it at the 11/20 meeting. Why can't we just treat this as continuing what was owed under the contract after the contract expired up until March 2023? It's a very good question. Of course, if you've signed lease agreements, probably you know that a common provision of them is that the lease agreement will turn into a month-to-month if nobody does anything to specifically renew it, or if you don't move out, these kinds of things. It's a very common provision. I did look at that. For two reasons, two important reasons, I don't think I can treat this as converting to month-to-month. The first is that the lease agreement that the city had with Team Summit specifically said it would not continue after its expiration date unless the city council explicitly authorized it. City council, as we know, did not specifically authorize it when it expired in November of 2020. Another important reason is that sometimes you have what are called quasi-contracts, or when two parties are acting like a contractual relationship exists, but they might be outside the formal constraints of a contract. Now, the city did not act like this agreement was in place after November of 2020. Most notably because the city was not billing Team Summit. By all accounts, the city was unaware that the city had this lease agreement in place for use of the property. So I don't think I can treat it as having converted to month-to-month, although that's certainly a good question, and it was worth researching. So instead, well, how do we calculate what the city is due? And in my memo to Mayor Norris, how I described it was it's what's called an unjust enrichment claim. And that covers situations, it's common law, it's created by judges, so it covers situations in which you're outside of a formal contract or a formal agreement, but which, in fairness and equity, one party has obtained a benefit that they're not entitled to lawfully, and they should be required to pay restitution to the other party. So, on the dates that I received from Team Summit revenue figures for the remaining period as well, and the figures I received show Team Summit used the property on about 19 different days over a period of over 2 years. The question is, how do you calculate what the city is owed for that time period? What I did is I took the rent formula that we had in this 2015 agreement and what would be owed for those days, and then I prorated it for the days that were actually used. I don't think an unjust enrichment claim would support restitution for an entire month of 31 days if Team Summit only used it for 2 days. So yes, I certainly believe that Team Summit owes the city money, but not for the entire month, not under an unjust enrichment plan. So that's how I got the figures, and for those 19 days, I got a total of $1,154.12. I believe that the council asked me on November the 20th to come back with a proposal. That's what I've done. I've not negotiated anything with Team Summit. My only communications with Timmons at Team Summit was asking her for the revenue figures. And then when she saw that this was on the agenda, she called me and asked me about it, and I said, no, we haven't negotiated anything. I'm just coming to the council with a proposal. I think any lawyer would tell you that it's sensible to consider negotiating before you decide to pursue civil litigation. As I'm sure you all probably know, litigation is time-consuming, expensive, and uncertain. Can't ever really guarantee what a judge or a jury would do with a case. With that introduction out of the way, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have 2 public comment cards. I'll take them in the order that they came. Miss Janet Watkins, please come on down. State your name and address for the records, please, ma'am.
My name is, excuse me, my name is Janet Watkins. I live at 11400 Crystal Hill Road in the city limits of Maumelle. I'm probably less than I'll say about a quarter of a mile down the hill from Park on the River, so I am a neighbor to Park on the River. And I'm the only one down there. A lot of the residents are in that Little River Bend subdivision that is actually in North Little Rock. And so I'm sure they don't want to get involved in this. I'm not a numbers person. I tend to round numbers off. And I spent approximately 35 years in the real estate business. I know when you rent a property, you're supposed to pay rent on it. And so, say I rent a house from the city council, and I decide, well, I'm going to go to Hawaii and stay 3 weeks out of that month. Well, guess what? I still have to pay the whole month's rent. And so, to my way of thinking and to my experience in real estate, if you rent something, you have possession of it, and nobody else can control it or do anything with it, then you pay rent for every day that it's in your possession. I don't care whether you use it or not. I don't care whether you live there or not. You still pay rent because you're under contract to pay rent. And I just want to ask the city council to vote no on this. Why are we making a deal? Why are y'all or whoever's wanting to make a deal with her to looking at the figures roughly, she owes $60,000. Why in the world would you take our tax money as residents and cut a deal and say, well, okay, we've decided to give you $30,000 for free? That doesn't set well with anybody that pays taxes in Maumelle. And that's all I've got to say, except I owe a bill, I pay it. She owes this bill, she should pay it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next comment card, Mr. Alan Bruce Wagner. Come on down. Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Alan Bruce Wagner, 36 Chico Drive. I apologize, I've got a little frog in the throat right now. First, I would like to thank all of this body that responded to the email that I sent you. That's outlined some of my concerns that are very similar to Ms. Watkins in this case. I'm not advocating that we take that she owes us $37,000 for the time that we weren't under contract. But I do advocate that we continued on. We didn't do what we needed to do. They didn't do what they needed to do proactively. So when you start looking at it from that standpoint, to take this down to $1,154 only when $12,000 worth of revenue was generated during that period of time, and access was granted for 28 months, 28 months access that weren't under contract, and I understand Responsibility for that has been taken. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you standing up for that. But by the same token, the responsibility for owing this bill needs to be paid. We need to separate the $30,300 out that's hard code leased, and then look at on the other part of it from the standpoint of maybe not $37,000 or $38,000, but maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $15,000 for the access. It was the access and the revenue. Could that be considered? Would this council consider that? Would you think about that? That's what I ask you to do, is look at it. I'm not trying to hang somebody over a barrel and rip them apart, but at the same time, there were some other financial considerations going on in that arena with this company. And that tends to indicate, as Ms. Watkins says, the citizenry looks at that and says, are we being ripped off? Are we? Don't know. I understand the position on this for unjust enrichment in that case. But I also think there is the case to be made, as was pointed out by one of the members, that this is a continuation of the lease because you bookend it with a new lease. So the terms remain in effect. Actually, looking up some real estate law in Arkansas, it says to basically the effect that if you go on to that, it continues as a holdover. And at that point in time, what you really wind up arguing in this court is if you try to charge them more than what the original lease had on it. So, don't know, can't understand, just ask for your consideration to look at it in those cases. I think there is money there that is owed us more than $1,154.12. My thoughts. Everybody's got an opinion. Thank you for listening to mine. And again, thank you to all that responded to my email that I sent. If you didn't get it, it was sent under abwpers@gmail.com, could be in your spam. And I would like to thank the Public Works and our first responders for what they did during this past week of ice terror. They did a good job. My dad worked for the State Highway Department for 40 years. I know firsthand what they go through. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion, but before we do, I am the sponsor of this resolution because the city attorney can't be a sponsor of the resolution. I was not involved with the calculation of these numbers. I haven't talked to anyone from Team Summit about these numbers or anything along those lines. So I just wanted to point that out. Floor is open for, yes, sir?
I, of course, thank the members of the public, specifically for something that Mr. Wagner had said. You know, why is the figure that I have in the spreadsheet 1,000 and change instead of 12,000? You know, I did try to research this to figure, I couldn't find any cases that were like specifically similar to our scenario. For this second period of time, I want to emphasize that it is an estimate. It's not like the period of time that's under contract, in which I can look at the terms of the contract and say, here is specifically what's owed to the city. I do want to emphasize that. There's no formula in the Arkansas Code annotated that says, well, for unjust enrichment, you know, that would cover this specific situation. This is, I think, and I also can't guarantee, well, if you pursued litigation, here's the number you would get. Unfortunately, no lawyer can guarantee you, here's the number that you would get. So how I interpreted the City Council's direction on November the 20th of that meeting was to get the numbers and to come back with a proposal. And so that's, so I endeavored just to do that. Like Mayor Norris said, he was gracious enough to sponsor this. The whereas clauses just set out kind of the history of this. As I'm sure you're all familiar with, but yes, I did my best to try to come up with a proposal based on the legal research that I'd done, my factual knowledge of the background, and try to be as transparent as possible, sending you all my spreadsheets and try to explain, here's how I got the figures that I got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have a follow-up question. Is the number that you're asking to the number you're asking to settle this for, is that at what you think? You mentioned that you don't know the specific formula or how that second time period is calculated. Is it your opinion that if this matter went to litigation, is this the amount you would think we'd get, or is this did you take that number and reduce it down in order to compromise, or what is your best opinion based on the information that you have as to if this matter went to litigation, what you thought the city would get?
If it went to litigation, that's, for the second period of time, that's about, I think, what I would, so, I mean, in a civil complaint, you wouldn't put a particular number in. You'd make allegations and you'd say, we're entitled to restitution for unjust enrichment. And then you go through discovery, you get financial documents, records, these kinds of things. And then you might get a more exact number at a summary judgment hearing. If it went all the way to trial, at trial. Do I think it's $40,000 for that time period? No, I don't. An unjust enrichment theory looks specifically at, these particular dates. That's the reason that I don't think I could treat it as converting to a month to month, is that the agreement specifically said it's over in November of 2020, and then the city wasn't treating it like like the contract was continuing. But yes, that is, I think, it's approximate to what I think we would ask for, yes.
Thank you, sir. Open up the floor. Councilmember Williams.
So, excuse me, is it your opinion, Mr. City Attorney, that if we were to go month by month after the contract expired, if we were to go back and bill month by month that way, because there was no contract, would we even have a legal leg to stand on that way? I mean, since there was no contract, there's no agreement, to do it based on use makes more sense to me.
Yes, that's right. Because I think for two principal reasons. The first being...
And I'm talking legalities.
Yes. I don't think I can make a legal claim that it converted to month, both because the contract specifically said it would not continue without city council explicit approval, and also because the city wasn't acting like the contract was continuing month to month. The city wasn't acting like the contract existed.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Any additional comments? Councilmember Mosley.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank the city attorney for, we gave him a really tough assignment. And I think you put a lot of thought into it. I know you suffered through several phone calls from me, looking at a lot of things and actually sitting down in person and looking at this from all different sides. And we didn't agree, but I think it was a tough call. I think it was, I think you seriously considered my standpoint. It may have just been a couple of grains of sand that tilted you in the other way, but anyway, it is what it is. So I am going to vote no against this. I'm in agreement with the original estimated schedule that Ms. Sousa prepared back in March of about $68,000, which would be applying the contract just the way it was. I do feel like the city and Team Summit acted as if the contract was still in force. The city continued to refer anybody that was interested in renting that facility to Team Summit, just as it had been before. And it really wasn't offered to the public, to anybody else. So those are kind of my thoughts. And also I'd gotten an email from a constituent today, Melody Paik, who I think put forth some good reasoning on that. So I agree with her reasoning. And so anyway, I will be voting no on this. I think the number should be about $68,000. And I want to thank all the residents who have weighed in on this issue through emails, through comments at the city council. We had two great comments tonight, and you know, we're trying to do the right thing, and you have to argue it out, and I think it's been done in a constructive manner. So, anyway, but I will be voting no. I do have one question, is the agreement, usually you have, the owner of a company or the president or somebody like that that's gonna be signing. This is an authorized agent. And I was just wondering if the city attorney had verified that seen the paperwork that made him comfortable that that's the case or whatever.
Mr. City Attorney?
I just put authorized agent because I wasn't sure what her particular title was.
Okay.
But she signed the original agreement, so I got it.
So, okay, so it's her prerogative to determine what
Yes.
her authority is. All right, thank you. Again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Holt?
Mr. City Attorney, are you telling me that we have not had any direct conversation with Timmons' organization in any way? We've not approached her directly and had any person-to-person contact, is that right?
After the November, I'm sorry.
Pardon me? Go ahead.
After the November 20 meeting, you all asked me to get revenue figures from her.
Right.
So I emailed her and got the revenue figures. I corresponded with her about that. Let me see. She sent me the revenue figures, I believe, the morning of January 2nd, which was our next meeting. Then she called me after she saw it on the agenda, and I said, no, we haven't had any negotiations. So I've only had those conversations with her, just about the revenue figures.
Do you feel that, or does she feel that she has been fair, or have any, she doesn't think that she took advantage of the blank spot that the city had, that just because somebody, well, you know what I mean, that a fair person wants to do their part regardless of, because their word of honor. But so you don't think that she skillfully took advantage of someone not looking, and she made something out of it, you know?
I've not had any conversations with her that would, I mean, truly, it's just been emailing with her. I mean, we've gotten a few FOIA requests here and there where I requested some additional insurance records from her. I've not had any conversation that would let me make a judgment one way or another about that.
I just think that a person of integrity and business responsibility, this lady is a very shrewd, calculative, successful business lady, and I do not see any naivety or lack of understanding about business procedures. And, you know, for the city, many years ago, there used to be a commercial for a store called Fred's, and they had this commercial where the woman was in the background, and she said, "Fred, you're giving the store away." I apologize, my walking cane fell. You know, and it seems like for our part, how many dollars are we expecting to actually put in our hand from how much?
If you approve this, and if she accepts, it would be $31,443.93.
31,000?
And change, yeah.
And that would be due within what period of time?
The proposal I have has it due within 90 days of the signature.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yeah, just so I fully understand. So had we keep billing, it would have been construed as a month-to-month, or we could have gone that, but because that wasn't our part, because we didn't bill anything, is that why it can't be considered to have been a month-to-month?
That was one of two primary reasons. If we had continued billing, I mean, the problem probably never would have arisen, to be perfectly honest.
Good point.
But yes, generally parties can, even after a formal contract expires, generally parties can continue to act in, they call it quasi-contract. And it can still be enforceable if both parties are acting like the contract still exists. We still have that complicating factor that our lease agreement said it wouldn't continue. So you might run into a problem where the city council would have to ratify it after the fact. I don't know. But yes, that's one of the two principal pieces of evidence, yeah.
Then, it's hard, this sets up a precedent for future. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes on both sides, so I don't want to throw the book, but it just seems that it's almost like a slap on the wrist that other contractor could, do something similar, but it doesn't sound like we have legal footing to really do anything else.
I mean, whether it could create precedent, like if we come into this situation, like suppose we rent it out, I don't know, some other property, and then a few months or a few years after the fact, we realize we're in the same scenario. Is that what you mean, sir?
Yeah.
Would we be forced to treat that situation the same? I mean, probably there are enough unique facts about both of the scenarios that we could argue. I mean, so when Mayor Norris asked me for a memo on like, what are our legal options? Like, the legal options I gave him were like, well, for the period that's under contract, if you bill her and she refuses to pay, we just call that a breach of contract claim. It's very, very routine, right? Mm-hmm. For the period that's not under contract, it's more complicated. It's, I would pursue an unjust enrichment claim. I don't think, I don't know if it would really, I hope the city wouldn't be in this scenario again. The best you can do is, I mean, you have to do a few different things when you come in this kind of situation. Try to change procedures so that it doesn't happen again, and then pursue what you're owed. The calculation that I have, I think this is certainly for the period under contract. Again, that part's easy to calculate. For the period that's not under contract, I can see it's difficult to calculate. You look at the case law, and it's kind of like in terms of equity and fairness and these kinds of things under an unjust enrichment claim. It's hard to calculate, I think. The reason I use the prorated model is I said, well, the city apparently values use of this property at around $1,500 a month. Basically, that's what the rent was for every month. Even under the formula that's based on revenue, it's around $1,500 a month. So how much was 2 days worth? Well, probably 2 days worth of $1,500 or around $100. That's the reason I don't think using it for 19 days over 2.5 years. Again, when we're not under contract, I don't think it's worth $40,000. That's my reasoning, at least.
Anything further? Any additional discussion on Resolution 2024-01? Councilmember Tierney?
Yeah, one thing that we haven't discussed on this matter is during that time period when the contract had expired, and that was in the middle of the pandemic, and so if this had been the type of thing where we had a contract and that'd be another matter. But since the contract had expired, there were no usage of it. I know in my own business I was offered free rent for a time period to try to get through the pandemic. I mean, it was a devastating thing that happened to a lot of businesses. And if we had a contract, yeah, I'd go for the full amount. But with the expired contract, then you go back to the way Attorney Thornton has looked at the actual usage. And the whole thing about unjust enrichment is a double-edged blade. I mean, it's not fair for Team Summit to unjustly enrich themselves at the expense of the city, but at the same time, it's not fair for the city to unjustly enrich ourselves at the expense of Team Summit for something that they weren't even able to use at the time. So there's a lot of extenuating circumstances in this, so it's kind of a muddy matter. And so I compliment Attorney Thornton for doing the best he could to try to come up with a resolution that kind of splits the difference, because I think really in any type of situation you got like this, you're going to have to come to a compromise. And the thing about a compromise, nobody's happy. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at right now. And I kind of understand where he's saying about if we did go into legal pursuit of this matter, we'd probably be lucky to end up right back where we're at right now. So I mean, and then of course that would also be a very expensive process to do. So there's other expenses. I mean, so at what point do you cut your losses and just settle up?
Thank you, sir. Any additional discussion? Councilmember Mosley?
Mayor, could we do this with a roll call vote?
If we get to a vote, we'll do the vote normally, and then we can roll call after. But I don't have a motion in a second.
Okay, thank you.
At this point. So if there's no, Councilmember Williams?
I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2024-01.
I've got a motion to adopt resolution 2024-01. Do I have a second? I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Shin?
Could you give us the actual number again? We've talked about a lot of numbers. What is your?
The number in resolution 2024-01 is a total amount of $31,443.93.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. City Attorney?
I just wanted to, I don't know if I might not have said this, but I've never viewed this as, I don't view this proposal, I don't think this proposal does that, as cutting a break to Team Summit. I know that, I guess Ms. Souza prepared a spreadsheet earlier in 2023. It set out a total of like $68,000 or $70,000 as supposedly the amount that was owed. I've looked into this, and if you directed me to file suit, I don't think I could ask for $68,000 or $70,000. For the reasons that I've explained now a few times, I don't think I can treat it like it converted to month in order to get the amount of $68,000 or $70,000. So I've just walked into this trying to get like, how do I calculate what I think the city is entitled to? With the caveat that the second period of time, well, we might disagree about, is a day worth, $50 or $100? We might disagree about that, but I don't think the second period of time is worth $40,000 for using it on 19 days of a period of more than 2 years. That's, I guess, the bottom line.
So if I could, let me ask you this, it was my first question, but I just maybe want to reword it a different way. A lot of times people think of a settlement and they say, we think we're owed this amount, they think they're owed this amount, so let's compromise and meet somewhere in the middle. You have proposed numbers that say what you think the city is entitled to, and those numbers are in the resolution, is that right?
Yes, sir, with the caveat that calculating for the second period of time, trying to figure out the benefit under a theory of unjust enrichment, it's hard to calculate. With that caveat, yes.
So while we're calling this a settlement or a compromise, it feels to me different than we often think of as a settlement or a compromise, where we think we're owed this amount, the other people think they owe this amount, and we kind of settle it up. What I'm hearing you saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that what you think we're owed is the number to the best of your ability to calculate it, is the number in the resolution.
Yes, sir. So a comparison you might have is, suppose somebody makes a wage and hour claim against the city. You think they're entitled to nothing, but trial is 2 weeks away. They think they're entitled to $100,000. And you decide on some amount. You're getting something for it. You're getting certainty. You're getting a quicker payment than if you go through litigation. So you're getting more, but yes, those are the totals that I got. With that caveat that I have that this second period of time is just it's just plain hard to calculate, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilmember Holt? I'm sorry?
I hope it didn't.
We'll see. Councilmember Holt?
Mr. City Attorney, if all had gone well and continued under contract, we didn't have that lapse, what would you estimate that the dollar amount that the city would have been entitled to under contract, leaving out the fact that, but, what would have been the most that you probably, had you been requested to do so, to file a lawsuit for?
So are you saying, sir, that if the contract had extended all the way through March of '23?
Hypothetically.
Okay, and if we, in the same kind of background where we just noticed late in 2022 that we hadn't been billing for a few years, in that case, if we were still, we would still be under the contract through March of '23. So it would be whatever that calculated figure would be. I think Ms. Souza came up with 68,000. In that situation, yes, it would be closer to 68,000 or 70,000. But that's not the situation we're in, unfortunately.
So that's the money figure with or without the contract and the technicality of it?
No, that would be with the contract. If the contract were, if it weren't a 5-year agreement, and if it were instead, I guess, 7.5-year agreement.
Right.
Yes.
Speaking as an outsider, I have heard that there is a principle in law that asks the question, what would a reasonable person do? Has that reasonable question been approached to Team Simmons, Timmons, I'm sorry, apologize.
What would a reasonable person do? I'm not sure.
Well,
what you mean.
Understanding that we certainly showed ourselves as not being proficient in money management, to say the least, right? But beside our ineptness, that company continued to operate and got by with the fact that they were not technically under a contract, but they didn't go broke during that period of time due to misuse. So you can't deny that she still was prospering, even though we left the door open for her. I mean, you see what I'm saying? I mean, she got by with the fact that we didn't have her tied up, but the basic principle is that a reasonable person wants to do their share anyway, unless they're just taking advantage of, hey, there's somebody not looking and I'm going to do it anyway. But I'm not suggesting that's her. I'm not attempting to lay any misimpression.
So it might be useful to consider that, what if the city was aware in November of 2020, hey, we have this contract expiring, let's have Team Summit come into a city council meeting and she can tell us whether she wants a new contract. And in November, December of 2020, I think we were still in the throes of COVID. And I don't know if she would have re-signed a new contract. I don't know what she was aware of, not aware of. I don't know, beyond the net revenue figures for this property, which she provided, I don't know what her financial condition is or the condition of the company. I don't know how she runs her books or anything like that.
So she holds no blame for this. It is strictly, the blame is laid at our doorstep.
I'm not saying she holds no blame for it. Our practice under the contract leading up to April or May of 2019 was apparently every few months sending over an invoice that would cover a few months at a time. And then at some point, we didn't send any more invoices. And so the practice apparently under the contract was that we would send invoices and she would pay them. And at some point, we stopped sending invoices. I don't know who's to blame. I can tell you legally what I think what the city is owed from her. I'm not gonna, it's not typical of lawyers to get into to kind of evaluate moral blameworthiness. That's not really, I can give you legal answers.
I understand.
I'm not gonna make judgments about, you know, moral blameworthiness, yeah, character, anything like that. I don't have any information to go one way or another. I'll look more at the black and white of it.
So if you vote no for this, then we're dead, period.
No, if you vote no on the resolution, I'd ask you for direction as to what, I'd ask you for direction as to what you want to do. You know, you can't pursue litigation on a breach of contract without demanding payment, so that's for the period that's under contract. If you vote no on this, if you direct me to file litigation on the unjust enrichment claim, I will, but civil litigation would take probably at least a couple years before trial. It'll take city employees away from their business. They have to sit for depositions, turning over discovery. At the end of all of it, we might get nothing.
I understand. I would ask the city attorney to proceed with preparing for a lawsuit, and we may lose, but there is a principle that everybody knows, that a gentleman's agreement, so I don't know what it is, I don't want to use any words, just that there is there, and we have a right to pursue that, to see if a jury trial may feel that one way or the other. I'm not suggesting that they would or wouldn't, I'm just saying that I would request respectfully that you proceed with preparing for a lawsuit.
I can tell you for a breach of contract claim, we would have to make a claim under the contract first. So, and I don't really think that there's much dispute of anything about what we're owed under that period of time.
Okay.
And I'm telling you that under the second period of time, I don't think it's $40,000. I mean, it's hard to estimate, but I don't think, when we were charging around $1,500 to use it for an entire month, what's equitable to charge somebody to use it for 2 days? I don't know.
Well, I appreciate it, and
Yes, sir.
thanks for your answer.
All right, Councilmember Williams?
Okay, so what I think you were saying, Mayor, is that this is not a compromise because there's not been a negotiation. Is that what you were trying to say? Is it?
Well,
We say somebody owes this and they say this, and then we try to meet in the middle. This is black and white figures. This is not, as I see it, a compromise, because we haven't given it to her and she hasn't come back to us, so there's not been a negotiation.
That was what I was asking the city attorney. Was the number that was being presented, was that the number you think we're lawfully entitled to, or is that a compromise less than what you thought we were entitled to?
That's my estimate of my opinion that we're entitled to, yes.
Councilmember Shin?
I've been on both sides. I've been a leaseor and a leasee, and only once have I done a lease where it was a variable, where I had to send a statement every month. But I go back to a time that I moved to a new location, had my utilities transferred over, and 90 days later, one of the utilities companies still had not sent me a bill. And I reached out to them because I didn't want a massive utility bill to hit me all at once when they figured out they weren't billing. And I kind of come back to that in this situation. I realized it was COVID and such as that, but we had an existing agreement. And, you know, yes, the city wasn't doing their part, but we never had anybody reach out either to say, hey, you're not doing your part. And I kind of struggled with that.
Thank you, sir. All right, I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2024-01. Is there any additional discussion on that resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no.
No.
Madam City Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember.
Hang on, let me get it right.
Councilmember Mosley.
No.
Councilmember Grunwald.
Yes.
Councilmember Mazzoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Williams.
Yes.
Councilmember Tierney.
Yes.
Councilmember Shin.
Yes.
Councilmember Holt.
No.
Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. Motion passes. Resolution 2024-01 is adopted. With that, we will move on to the next item of business, which is the first reading of Ordinance 1109, amending Section 2-64 regarding council meetings. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1109, an ordinance to amend Section 2-64 of the Maumelle City Code concerning the order of business at council meetings and for other purposes.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and let Councilmember Mosley introduce this ordinance.
Yes, sir. Shifting gears, my purpose in doing this is we went through 3 or 4 meetings to where somebody would present a handout right before a meeting that ended up being an item of discussion at the meeting, and the public couldn't see what we were discussing and that sort of thing. And so I was proposing that we change things to require that any such crucial documents like that would have to go into the city council packet, or we would just have to wait until the next meeting to where it could be put in there. And I got with the city attorney, and he did some research, and it turns out, as I understand him correctly, that we basically already have that kind of language in our city code. And he actually did a modification because to try to prevent in case there is something that's considered and something passes, that somebody won't have an ability to come back and say that didn't count. So I'll let the city attorney maybe explain that better than I could, and let me know if I'm on track here.
Yes, sir, that's correct. So in our city code at 264, it already required ordinances and resolutions to be submitted to the city clerk ahead of time. I understood Councilmember Mosley to be asking that to be expanded, basically, so the topics of discussion, handouts, reports, all these things would also be submitted to the city clerk ahead of time. And then he was gracious enough to let me add a subsection E, which is basically a disclaimer, so that, sometimes things will come up after the city clerk's deadline, and you want to take action on it. So subsection E makes clear that just because it comes in after the city clerk's deadline, if you do decide to take action on it, it's not going to affect the validity of your action. The only remedy if something comes in after the deadline is to table it until the next meeting. Trying to think of an example, but occasionally, as you know, we do get last-minute resolutions, last-minute reports, or PowerPoint slide decks, these kinds of things.
So as I understand it, if something is presented like that, we just make a motion, say, let's table this till the next meeting, if you want to consider this handout or whatever, and that the appropriate thing to do would be to probably table it to the next meeting.
Yes, it would be up to the city council would be able to decide whether to table it, just like any other motion to table. Yep.
The main reason I propose this is just transparency. I want the residents, I want everybody to say we're being open and we're not trying to hide anything from anybody. So anyway, that's all I've got, and I hope people will vote for this in a couple of meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yeah, not that it's really happened yet to know of, but say there's a resolution or an ordinance that came out, and there's some that are more complicated, and one of us does some research and come up with stuff that's really probably too much to just speak. How would that be treated under this ordinance? Would we be not allowed to give it to the other council members that day because it's already in there, or would we have to table a reading of the ordinance till the?
I think it would be up to so I think the city council would get to decide. So suppose it's just a paragraph extra, maybe the council members don't think that's, you know, a big enough change to table it till the next meeting. But if you come in with a stack of stuff and the people say, and the council members decide, you know, I really want some time to think about what Councilmember Mazzone brought to the meeting tonight, can we please table this resolution? It would be up to the council to decide what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good ordinance. It reflects what we already do, which is our council packet includes more than just the ordinances and resolutions. We include exhibits, and then oftentimes, if there is material in time, include it in the council packet. So, I mean, I think it reflects what we already do, and already if somebody comes in and says, I need more time to think about something because of this last minute information, the council has on occasion and sometimes does table things already. And since you could end up in a scenario where that information wasn't being included in the packet, it's a good ordinance. Anything additional? If not, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting, and we will move on to the next order of business, which is the first reading of Ordinance 1110, amending Maumelle Code definition. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance 1110, an ordinance to amend the Maumelle City Code's definition of family for purposes of zoning regulations and for other purposes.
Thank you. This was an ordinance proposed by the city attorney, so I'll let him introduce it.
Yes, Mr. Grummer and I were speaking about another issue, and we came across, we were looking in the zoning regulations, and they have a long list of definitions. One of them is for a definition of family for purposes of like single-family, multifamily dwellings. And one of them uses now outdated language referring to mentally retarded or physically handicapped persons. So this just provides more modern language.
Quick question, does this functionally change anything or just cleaning up the language?
I think it is a little bit broader, but to be perfectly honest, we would, I mean, in the planning department, the city would interpret that phrase mentally retarded or physically handicapped to also cover people with mental illness, which is broader. It's not just a technical change. It does use words that are a little bit broader than they used to be.
Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, I'm gonna think about this one a little bit more between the next meeting. We had so many, had some meaty matters on the agenda tonight, and so I didn't put a whole lot of time into thinking about this. But you know, what should be considered a family or what shouldn't, and that sort of thing. Anyway, so I'll think about that some more over the next 2 weeks. Thanks.
Any additional comments? If not, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting. Next up is the first reading of Ordinance 1111, accepting dedication of streets and drainage. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1111, an ordinance to accept and confirm the dedication of certain streets and drainage in the development known as Stone Canyon Addition subdivision and for other purposes.
Thank you. This is our standard dedication ordinance for developments coming through. I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Mosley.
It just seemed like we'd already done this before, but I guess we haven't, or at least with the latest approved subdivision. So I never disagree with these kind of things because we've already fought the battle as to whether we're going to have the development or not, and we've got to get the streets if we're going to go ahead and do it. So I'll vote yes on this.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, that'll be on second reading at the next meeting. We'll move on to the first reading of Ordinance 1112. 12, amending code to include an audit committee. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1112, an ordinance to amend the Maumelle City Code to create an audit committee of the City Council and for other purposes.
All right, this was an ordinance from Councilmember Mosley, so I'll let him introduce it.
All right, thank you. My brain's a little fried after some of these arguments here, so I'm just going to read my notes here and try to clean them up. Basically, this ordinance is a product of our discussion with Forbes auditors back in December 18th council meeting. We had quite a thorough discussion about internal control deficiencies and why we remained behind on audits and trying to figure out how to catch up. Forbes spoke highly of some of their other clients that had audit committees and then indicated a committee could be beneficial in this regard in trying to catch up with our audits and get our internal controls in better shape. And so we talked about that, and I said if nobody objected, I'd ask the city attorney to prepare an ordinance to do that, and nobody objected, so I went ahead and asked the city attorney to do so. He and I ended up both working on it pretty closely, I think, although we were pressed for time. We weren't able to get it on the first January council meeting agenda because of the holidays. We were both out of town and all that. So we put some thought into it. We studied Fayetteville. He was able to come up with the Fayetteville ordinances and the Fort Smith ordinances. Both those cities are bigger than we are, and you know, as we grow, we need to get more sophisticated in how we do things. Maybe even at some point, maybe even get an internal audit function. I don't think it would be a full-time job anywhere near at this point, but so we use their situations there to try to mold this. And at one time we were getting fancy with some things, and the city attorney would say, well, if we're going to put somebody with a CPA that's just a regular resident on this committee, we need some city code to do that. So we elected not to go into all this complexity at this point and just set it up, and then as we deem, once the committee starts operating, they can say, well, it really would be nice to have a CPA on here, and then at that point we'll propose an amendment to allow that to happen. So, but this would be a very simple committee, just be 3 people. I'm proposing that it be the people that have the most education and experience in accounting and auditing, and I view it. I view the first year activities to simply be to primarily make sure we get caught up on our audits over the next 12 months here, and working with the auditors to find ways to improve our accounting controls, ask them for detail on what they think our weaknesses are, and perhaps sit down with our city finance director and the auditors in a meeting and just say, how can we improve those? But I think that would be the first order of business for the first year, is to just do something as simple as that. And then as we learn and maybe get Forbes to kind of almost train us on how to be an audit committee, we'll go forward into other things if we deem it appropriate. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions, and like the previous ordinance there, I'd be certainly hopeful that we can vote yes on this and get that underway as soon as possible.
Thank you, sir. Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, of course, happy to help any of the council members. You come with, like Mr. Mosley did, you come with proposals for this or that. Happy to help you turn it into an ordinance. I typically don't take positions on whether you should make an ordinance or this. Just remind everybody that state law says the council can't delegate its authority to its committees. So all committees can do is give advice, they can meet, discuss things, obviously, and come back with recommendations, but the council can't say, well, the audit committee now is gonna, decide whether to accept our audits or appoint an audit, these kinds of things. It's just advisory committees.
Yeah, good point, thank you.
And so, in follow-up to that, Mr. City Attorney, what authority does this, would this committee have?
The authority to meet, I guess request the attendance of management and the auditor, always request information from management or the auditor, make recommendations to the city council. I think that's it, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Gronwald?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of quick questions. So we were talking about 3 members on this committee. Where does the number 3 come from?
Just an appropriate number, an odd number, so if you have a vote, you've got an odd number, you wouldn't have a tie.
Well,
and
that
not
was
too
the only thing
unwieldy.
that I had a hang up about, because I think this is a good idea, but it makes more sense to me to have one person from each ward, and then one council person from each ward, and then, as you stated, you might have a couple of, for lack of a better term, civilians at some point that would then make up your odd number. So that would be the only recommendation for a minor change that I might talk about. Other than who qualifies for that, I'm not sure I agree with that as far as who has the highest education. I would want to know who chooses those members, but whoever has the highest education versus, the highest experience and all that, I'm not sure that always dictates who's going to have the best input. I have a master's degree and have gone through nonprofit audits, but I'm not sure that I'm the best person for this committee, if that makes sense. There could be somebody who has a bachelor's degree who has much more experience or input than I do. So I just don't want us to get hung up on that little bit, but other than that, those are my only 2 questions, critiques.
Councilmember Tierney?
Yes, I'm curious, is this going to be a permanent committee, or is this something just until we resolve our current delinquency?
This would be, as we're doing it. As I understand it, it would be a standing committee, is that correct, Mr. City Attorney? A standing committee, so it would be a permanent committee unless it's dissolved, is that correct?
Yes, it would be, if you add it to the code as created as a committee, yes. The code allows for what they call ad hoc committees, which are usually more, like if you wanted to study, you wanted to make an internal committee about studying whether the feasibility of a swimming pool or something like that, one particular small issue. This would be a standing committee. Because it's created by the code, it would have to be dissolved by the code as well.
Councilmember Williams?
So, as much as I loved sitting in your chair a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Mayor.
You did wonderful.
Well, thank you, but I am not a mayor, and we are not a body of mayors. We are a legislative body, and I think administrative duties belong elsewhere and don't belong with a legislative body. So that's just my 2 cents worth on a audit committee.
Thank you. I wanted to, I'll leave the floor open. I did have some concerns about how I don't like, if we're saying the city council should appoint folks to a committee, then the city council should be able to decide who to appoint to that committee, not be limited by who has the highest degree or professional experience. It could be that somebody has a master's and worked for 5 years as a CPA 40 years ago and has been in another field entirely, who might then sort of trump someone with more relevant experience. Whenever you get into qualifications like that, you end up with sticky situations, and then what is the remedy if somebody is not appointed who believes that they were the one who was best fit the code here? So to the extent that there was a committee, I'd just advocate that the council choose that person. We have a few sections of codes that, actually, I'm not sure if it's a city code, that says for A&P commissions, they're required to get people from certain areas, but just a more general thing saying the city council should make a determination of who they think would be best suited for that, or something along those lines, as opposed to specifically college degree and professional experience. Somebody could be a volunteer and run that, but not be a professional. So there's those. I have questions about what the purpose of this is. If it is simply to get informed, the first whereas, or the second one talks about falling behind on audits, which sort of implies that maybe the committee is somehow going to get caught up, but what is the purpose and what is their authority and how do they play? How does that happen? The idea of asking questions in in-depth follow-up with the auditors, as we've seen, is something that occurs pretty regularly now. There's not a closed door to asking those questions. So just my general thoughts on this as a whole. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments here. I think Ms. Grunwald's is a good one there about possibly having one alderman from each ward on this thing. It's another reason I just picked 3 was in the past we did a non-standing committee. I guess it was an ad hoc back there in about 2014, and there were only 3 council members or 4 that were really even interested in being on it. So I don't think we can conscript anybody to be on that committee. So, but so that I think that's a reasonable thing to do if that's what you would like. As far as I barely could understand your comments, Councilmember Williams, because I couldn't hear you that well. My ears still having trouble. You've got a soft voice, but.
If I could really quick, fun fact, so when my mic is off, there's a volume control on the left side of this box, and that is also a speaker. So sometimes when I have difficulty hearing, I turn my mic off and then turn you guys up and down. So you all should have an audio. That won't necessarily solve it, but just know there's an audio switch on the left side of your thing.
Okay.
If you push it up away from you, it'll turn the volume up. That may help.
All right. I
Maybe
think
not.
I think we're already jammed up there. So, all right, thank you. As far as we need to remember what the how it works here in the city and municipal is you actually have a city council that's above the mayor as far as authority and that sort of thing, and we're responsible for the accounting functions at the city, and I think I understood you to say that we would be. If we're forming an audit committee and looking at things that it's really none of our business, that it's really.
To echo what the mayor said, we do a lot of that already. You do a lot of that already. You do a lot of, you're very inquisitive about the audits and keeping things in line, which I appreciate. I think you do a very good job of that. I just don't think that a committee is necessary as far as moving forward with our audits. I just don't see that as being something that we necessarily have to do as it is an administrative problem, an administrative duty, not a problem, a duty, not necessarily a legislative one.
Okay.
A jet engine on in here in terms
Yeah,
of
we
that
do.
because I even had
But
difficulty.
I caught
I'm
that.
sorry, but I'm still
No,
recovering from, but that was my only point. It's not that I don't think it's our business. I do think it's our business, and I think we make it our business.
The whole idea is also just to show the, I think we need to take a next step and kind of move toward that, just due to our size and I consider us to be a fairly sophisticated city for our size, and I think we ought to move more into that, and I think we can find out more about what audit committees could be doing and helping the city from the auditors. So,
I had a question. So I'm looking at it from the outside. If we end up with an audit committee that wants weekly meetings with hypothetically, with a report from the finance director, I feel like, and I'm not saying this is supposed to be, it's just not very detailed at all. I don't know what the impact of that is, or if you end up with an audit committee who is simply requesting requesting the preparation of reports or documents and stuff. I can see scenarios, not too dissimilar to how you were talking about. You just never know who the next mayor might be, and maybe they don't. Same thing with the committee, and I'm not sure. Do they just select a chair amongst themselves? Anyways, the one thing I would caution is a overly busy audit committee putting demands on finance time above, and I'm not talking a quarterly meeting or something, but that will come at the cost of maybe hindering some of the things designed to accomplish, which I'm still not really sure the purpose, but so just if this does go forward, the committee needs to know that. So if the committee says, hey, finance director, can you prepare all this stuff? Even if they don't have the authority to do that, the finance director is going to prepare all that stuff, and they're going to stop doing what they were doing in order to prep for it. And you can probably tell they don't like walking into meetings unprepared. So the amount of preparation time is significantly higher than just that meeting time. Just food for thought. Okay. I'm sorry, Councilmember Mosley, were you still going?
No, I guess that's about it. I understand your concern. I don't think that would be the point to burden or ask for weekly reports or whatever. I think, it's to stay, just stay in the loop if there's some kind of internal control problem. It would be prudent to meet with the city finance director and see how to resolve that.
So like a mini group of auditors?
No, just have a meeting, say we understand this, is that true, and, how can we fix that? And how can we support you, actually, would be a lot of it, so.
So I'm just trying to figure out how this will work, because I'll be the one dealing with it on the back end. The auditors point out there's an internal control problem, notify the finance department. Y'all want to get involved on how to solve that problem? That control problem that we're hopefully paying the auditors to catch for us. So
I guess
again, here's what and I'm trying to understand it too, because I've not been a part of an audit committee nor attended any of those meetings. Auditors are going through the books, the processes, they audit something, they recognize that there's a flaw in some internal control. And they notify the finance department, like, hey, we'd recommend you do A instead of B. The finance department fits into that where? Or not the finance department, the audit committee fits into that where? As the go-between between the auditor and the finance department, or to sit down with the finance department and try and figure out how the finance department can do it differently than they're doing it?
I don't envision it being that much detail, Mr. Mayor. Just, like at the meeting where we got the audit report, I asked them if they could provide us with whatever weaknesses they did find, because I don't think they actually they just reported that one big deficiency. And just to know what maybe some of our internal control things are, and see that there's no, it's good to resolve those kind of things. And so, just be more follow-up just to see.
So
but we're feeling our way through this. We've never done this before. I've never done this before. But.
So the first section talks about the audit committee shall, in conjunction with other folks, review the city's financial reports and information, the city's system of internal financial and accounting controls, and the city's compliance with government laws and regulations regarding financial matters. So what is meant by the system of internal, like what is the audit committee reviewing in terms of those control, just things to think about. I don't know that, I'm gonna stop asking I'm not asking those questions because I've but when I look at the committee and then when I look at how committees sometimes are, they become a thing and an entity of their own. Have we thought about what this means and what those implications are once we have a committee by ordinance that now exists, reviewing those things? I don't expect those answers, just think about that,
Yeah.
into
Well,
how that
quite
goes,
honestly,
right?
that last sentence that you just keyed on was one that I almost struck out of here anyway. Because it was kind of a repetition of the very first sentence, so, but I went ahead and left it for then, because like I said, that was some language, that paragraph was kind of the key paragraph of the Fayetteville thing, and so I went ahead and left that intact.
Okay.
Just to, to say, we'll be reviewing the financial reports and that sort of thing too, so, or at least have the opportunity to.
What was so with the initial terms of 1 year, that means every year we're re-voting and appointing,
Yeah.
3 new folks?
That was my thought, and, the city attorney came up with the idea that, we need to also be able to, if there's a reason that maybe some council members shouldn't be on the committee due to a conflict of interest or something, that we can remove them or something like that too. So it gives the council the ability to remove somebody for, I guess, no particular reason, so.
Okay. I have no further questions at this moment. Any additional discussion on ordinance 1112? Seeing none, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting. We will move on to mayor's comments. First of all, with the inclement weather, by and large, what my policy and practice has been is to follow the state in terms of when they're closing and not dealing with Little Rock. We may be revamping that process, but so the days that we've been closed have, and the hours, for example, we delayed opening by 2 hours because the state of Arkansas, the governor's office declared state offices would not open until 10 a.m. So that's the rule of thumb. We do look at the county and then, of course, the weather. But so that has been that. With the snow days, of course, public safety's out and about. That means they, not only while they're here, but they've got to find ways to get here. Public safety has to get their people here in some situations. We see that a lot and recognize that. But in particular during ice and snow, it's a good time to remember the snow crew, who they themselves are sort of summoned up here and sleeping in the illustriously magnificent quarters at Public Works buildings. And they're doing that whether it snows or not, depending on what they think is going to happen. So we had our snow crew coming in this morning at 4 a.m. because we didn't know what was going to happen in terms of ice. Some of these folks get up here and they're here for days. We've got people with Public Works that have grown kids that never spent a day playing with their kids in the snow because they were always here. So it's just a good time to remember them and thank them. Also, there are other things in the city that must go on, rain or shine. Doreen in HR and her staff were up here in snow days and ice days chugging away. Wouldn't surprise me if Andrew was, as he seems to be here every time I think no one else will be here. So just a shout out and appreciate finance had, payroll will go on, regardless of whether it is, people can get here easily or not. So, it's a good time to recognize and thank them. The Municipal League, had its conference last week. And I know, I believe it was Councilmember Gronwald, Gardner, and Williams, I think was all that attended this time. And of course, what's that? And of course, the city clerk, treasurer, myself, and the city attorney. But as far as council members, I wanted to shout that out. It was kind of exciting because we got Volunteer Community of the Year again. And 7 cities in the state of Arkansas, 501 cities I think we're at right now. And Maumelle was one of the 7 that got it. So shout out to some of my staff for compiling that data and submitting it, but also to the community of Maumelle. We can only submit what people are doing, and Maumelle continues to be one of the best communities in the state, I'm convinced of, And we see that in terms of how people give back selflessly for the community. So round of applause to them. We also received an honorable mention in the, let me pull it out here, in the Arkansas Business as a Trendsetter City for Infrastructure and Water. This was regarding the creation of 2 rain gardens near Lake Valencia and Lake Willistine. These rain gardens capture rainwater and channel it away from roofs, driveways, lawns, and lessen the chances of flood while preventing that, like sort of serving as a temporary detainage before they go into the other more traditional ways. So that was Scott and his staff led that project. So shout out to y'all. And it's nice when we're recognized on a state level for sometimes the small things that we're doing. But good job with that. And I think that concludes my comments, so we can move on to council member comments. Councilmember Shin.
I've received 3 complaints in the last, well, before it turned to snow, about the inability to use the tennis courts over by the library because of lessons being taught. That there's someone that is there apparently all day long giving lessons and they can't get the courts.
So like a member with the, okay.
That's using it commercially, not just for personal use.
I'm not sure what the, how that works, so I'll figure it out. Any of them want to play pickleball?
2 of them do, actually.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
This wasn't what I was going to talk about, but I did see my first pickleball match on, I guess it was Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember which now, but they had, or maybe it was Friday, they had the pickleball set up in the gymnasium, and they appeared to be having a heck of a good time, and we pretty much figured out the rules by the time we finished our 2-mile walk. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. That'd be great. And I didn't realize they set that up there that much, but apparently every morning of the work week, it's pickleball. So.
Really interestingly, there was pickleball. It kind of faded out in the Maumelle Community Center until we had that pickleball bash. Mm-hmm. And people said, well, how can I play? And we were like, well, you can come in here. And then that group restarted and has been using it pretty regularly. So I bet, in fact, when we had the groundbreaking ceremony for the pickleball courts, we went in and grabbed some of the people playing pickleball and said, come on out, we're groundbreaking for the real courts. And so they were in some of the pictures and stuff like that. But
all right. Well, the thing I wanted to talk about was, I'd mentioned earlier that it'd be nice, I got to thinking it'd be nice if we could get RDOT out here, an appropriate representative with Arkansas Department of Transportation, to perhaps update us and just give us a general judgment or whatever on our traffic situation out here. From what I understand, we're on the list to eventually have Maumelle Boulevard widened from Counts Massey all the way to 430, and the mayor can probably speak on that. But I think it'd be nice to have them out here to kind of discuss when that might occur and under what conditions they might go ahead and start. And also just, for the big picture, do we have the ability to have another entrance to Maumelle, or are we pretty much stuck with what we've got? And so, how much should we be watching what our infrastructure capacity is as far as more home building, high-density housing, and things like that. So anyway, I'd like to ask the mayor to invite a representative to come and visit with us, just probably under invited guests or whatever for probably the next meeting, or if we can get it that quick, or.
I don't know that we can get it at all, but I can reach out and see. Yeah,
we've done that before, but it's been years ago. So it was back before we, got that third entrance going. So anyway, hopefully they'll do that. And
who did we brought someone out from RDOT?
Yeah, it may have been, what was his name, Scott? Was that his, the gentleman that was over Audrey? Can't remember his last name.
Are you talking about when they came to sell their, the tax?
No.
Okay.
That was done in a big forum there. I just want somebody to come and kind of let us ask them some questions about our situation out here. I think it would behoove us to be informed on those things. A lot of residents, say, can you widen the boulevard? And I said, yeah, we've heard we're on the list, but we don't know when, so it'd be nice to know.
I will see what I can, was it back before no, it wasn't someone from, we've had folks from Metro Plan in here. Which is maybe.
I actually, way back before I even ran for council, invited RDOT to come, and we had a group of 30 residents and asked them to come, and we just peppered them with questions. They were happy to come out and do that, so I gotta think they'd be happy to come out for the council.
Sounds fun. I say, no, I'm actually serious, but I sounded sarcastic. I was not intending to. Ask.
I inquired, Mr. Mosley, are you asking for a study to be done?
No.
Or are you asking for
No,
just question and answer?
just an informal question.
Okay, I see. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I might ask for a study after we talk to them. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just, okay. Any additional council member comments? Who's next? City attorney comments?
The very, very first public comment this evening was from Maumelle Friends of Animals. I'm sure you all got an email and a letter from them. Mr. Mayor has already asked me to prep a resolution, so it'll be on the next meeting agenda. A resolution that'll be supporting the Dalmatian painting hydrant program.
And then, yeah, thank you. Madam City Clerk?
Just want to remind you guys, the deadline to submit your statement of financial interest is January 31st. I can only accept notarized original documents. I cannot accept email submissions. And John Jones, I will be sending you this information I'm referring to, if you can get it back to me as quickly as you can. And congratulations. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, you'll also need to swear out an oath of office for the appointment.
All right, I believe that concludes the business for the council. At this time, I'd entertain hold on. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adjourn the city council meeting of June the 22nd, 2024.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was the slowest second for a motion to adjourn ever. Motion is second on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you for your service.